4 young women, all 4 of them, awoken in their bedrooms in the early morning hours by a home invader. All 4 of them attacked, beaten, robbed, kidnapped, and for 3 of them, brutally and horribly raped. The state will prove to you over the course of this trial, all at the hands of one man, the defendant, Toby Griego. The defendant is charged with multiple counts of sexual intercourse without consent, robbery, aggravated kidnapping, intimidation, aggravated assault, and assault with a weapon. For the 4 crimes he perpetrated on these 4 young women over a 6-month period here in Billings, it gripped our community. So you'll see a lot of photographs, you'll see some physical exhibits. Most importantly, you will see the defendant Toby Griego's telephone. You will hear and you will see the contents of that telephone. You will see the photographs and the videos recovered from that telephone. Photographs and videos that are precisely date and time stamped with the times and dates of these 4 brutal attacks. You will see some of these rapes on videos. You will see some of these rapes in photograph as they are occurring. And in one video, you will see the defendant turn his phone on himself, and you will see his face. And through all of this evidence and through these exhibits, the state will prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt the defendant, Toby Griego, is guilty as charged of all the crimes. January 27th, 2013, the first offense. There was a hand over her mouth and a blade to her throat. She'd been sleeping on her back. She was flipped over onto her stomach. With clothes from her room, her hands were tied behind her back. Her feet were bound. She was blindfolded, and she was gagged. The attacker was asking her questions about where's your money, where's your money bag, where's your jewelry. She could hear him going through her drawers, going through the items in her room. And then she heard him say, "Oh, look at this." He found her vibrator. And then it began. She will tell you that this attack seemed to go on for hours. Later, she would be raped vaginally with the end of a plunger, anally with the end of a plunger. She would be forced to masturbate. She could hear camera sounds in the background. At one point, she will tell you that the attacker forced her over the bed, unzipped his pants, and said, "Now it's my turn." And she was raped again. She will describe for you the fear, the pain, the humiliation. She will tell you how she was forced to bathe multiple times, scrub her body, have her head dumped into the bath. She will describe for you how she was watched while she urinated. She will tell you how her attacker tried to force her to defecate on her own bed. And when she couldn't, she was anally raped again with the end of a plunger. After that second time she was forced to take a bath, she was pulled out of the tub, put back in her bed, covered up, and her attacker fled. She waited till the coast was clear. She wanted to call 911, but her telephone was taken. It was gone. She ran to her neighbor's house and called 911. Evidence was gone. The vibrator she'd been attacked with, gone. The end of that plunger, gone. Sheets, gone. A glass she'd been allowed to drink out of, gone. She had items stolen, but there was also evidence that was missing. The case remained open. The second offense was April 24th, 2013. She woke up at about 8 o'clock in that morning in her bed, heard something. She turned to her right. There was a man kneeled down by her bed going through her things. She looked over at him and said, "Who are you? What are you doing?" As soon as she said that, the man sprang into action and attacked her. She was face down. She could hear the man going through her things in her room. The man came over to her. She could start hearing clicking sounds, like pictures being taken of her. The man started to pull her underwear down. The man then took his hand and gouged his fingers into her eyes until she complied and stopped fighting. He continued to take her underwear down. She fought back again, and she made it to her door. And she was screaming, get out," and started screaming for help. The man ran by her, punched her in the face, and fled the apartment. Police were called. Statements were taken. Again, no solid leads. Case stayed open. The third offense, May 27, 2013. Her hands were bound behind her back. Her feet were tied. And they were actually tied together, so she was hogtied. She also was blindfolded. She had a gag stuffed in her mouth. Her attacker then got a belt out of her closet and started to strangle her. Asking her questions like, "Are you going to listen? Are you going to do what you're told?" She will tell you she may have blacked out. She was losing oxygen. Everything was going black as she was being strangled. The next thing she remembered was her attacker left, came back into the bedroom with a bottle of wine, half a bottle of vodka she had in her kitchen. And then he made her drink. She was probably forced to drink that entire bottle of wine and half a bottle of vodka in minutes. And if she protested, she would get strangled again with that belt. She could hear the clicking. She could hear the pictures being taken. At that time, she was then also vaginally, anally raped with a curling iron. So she offered money. "I'll give you money." And so her attacker put a dress on her, and in the middle of the night, took her down the stairs, out to her car, put her in the back seat of her own car, laying face down. And he drove. They drove first to a Western Security Bank ATM. And it was there he thought she would make a break for it. Her hands were free, her feet were free. She was an athlete at one of our local colleges. She opened the door and she took off. Between all that alcohol, the fear, whatnot, she didn't make it very far. Her attacker tackled her from behind. Her head was driven into the pavement. She opened up a big gash on top of her head. Her attacker told her things like, "You dumb bitch, now you're gonna pay. You'll be sorry now." Put back in the car, they went to the ATM, and hanging out the window, she was forced to try and withdraw money. She couldn't get the numbers in right, couldn't enter the PIN. It wasn't working. So then they went to a second bank, First Interstate Bank on the West End. The same thing was tried. She couldn't withdraw the money. It didn't work. You will see the images and the videos from those ATM machines. You'll see the fear and terror in her eyes with the blood streaming down her face from that head wound. She was taken back to her apartment by her attacker, and there it continued. She was raped some more. Between the rapes and all the alcohol, and everything she was going through, she couldn't take it anymore. She just started vomiting everywhere. And all of these women were consistent about something else. The perpetrator kept telling them over and over throughout the ordeal, in a very calm voice, "Don't look at me. Shut up." And if they ever looked, they get punched. So at that point, they believed they had a serial rapist on their hands. They continued to work the case. Nothing was really breaking at that point. July 2nd, 2013, the fourth and final offense. Just like those other ladies, she was awoken in the middle of the night with a hand over her mouth, a hand over her eyes, and a figure by her bed. And it began. Flipped over onto her stomach, tied with her hands behind her back, her feet tied with some of her own clothing. She also was raped with foreign instruments. She could hear the clicking of photographs being taken. Her face and mouth were covered with duct tape. She could feel the wet grass of Rose Park under her feet. And she could start to smell the ditch. She could hear the pump house. And then on the edge of the ditch, she was forced to her knees. And her attacker was telling her things like, "You're not going to tell anybody. You're not going to call the police, are you?" Then he grabbed the back of her head, and he started forcing her head underwater. She will tell you that was the scariest moment of her life. She will tell you about all the thoughts that ran through her head, and she thought she was going to die. She was dumped repeatedly in that ditch. Then she was forced to jump in the ditch, told to wash off. Then her head was forced again under the water. She was dragged out of the ditch, marched back to her apartment, back upstairs, and she was raped again. I tell you, she remembered being tied to her bedpost with valances, photographed, raped, posed in different positions, and it went on and on. And finally, she was forced into the shower. Her genitals were scrubbed with her own electric toothbrush. Her face and mouth were sprayed down with cleaning solution. And while she was in the shower, her attacker left. Up to this point, there had been really no solid descriptions of the attacker, but all four women had been very consistent in this. The attacker was small. Based on all of the similarities, investigators knew they were still looking for this serial rapist. They were hoping for some type of a break. And that break came. It was mid-July 2013. And a Crime Stoppers tip came in. There had been a man following a woman at Hobby Lobby. That man was the defendant, Toby Griego. They started to conduct surveillance of the defendant. And they found he spent a lot of time at Rose Park. They also found that he spent a lot of time watching women. Turned out that they had a voice recording from the defendant from a couple years earlier. Detective Beckers had talked to him. And so they brought him in again. They read her a form, told her what she was going to hear, and then they played the voice for her. They played the defendant's voice. Her heart started to pound, and she said, unequivocally, "I am 100% sure that is the voice of the man who attacked me. I will never forget that voice." After that, detectives were able to obtain search warrants for the defendant's home, his car, and his telephone. And on August 22nd, 2013, they got his telephone and they downloaded the contents. The defendant was arrested on August 23rd of 2013 after the contents of that phone were found. And after he was arrested, the home invasions of young women here in Billings, they stopped. These four brave women, these four survivors, they are going to take this witness stand and they are going to recount for you in detail the worst moments of their lives. state will prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt that those awful, horrible moments came at the hands of Toby Griego, and the state will ask you to hold him accountable for his crimes, and convict him on all 27 counts.
In voir dire, we touched upon the subject of beyond a reasonable doubt. And it is the state's burden to prove each and every charge beyond a reasonable doubt. Some of you have had previous jury experience, and I know that you've had to wrestle with the application of that concept, beyond a reasonable doubt. And there will be a jury instruction that the court has actually read part of that jury instruction to you earlier. It goes on to say, while beyond a reasonable doubt does not mean beyond any doubt, or beyond a shadow of a doubt, proof beyond a reasonable doubt is proof of such a convincing character that a reasonable person would rely and act upon it in the most important of his or her own affairs. And when people contemplate the most important affairs of their life, they think of such activities as when they buy a home. So when you go to buy a home, you look at that project of buying a home from all the different angles. Because when you're buying a home, you have long-term and far-reaching consequences. You fully weigh the factors, price and location and ability to pay, and only when you have weighed this information and proof, and you are convinced of the character of that proof, do you proceed to make a decision. I would like to point out to you certain events and certain factors for your consideration. On January the 27th, around 6 o'clock in the morning, she was attacked. Described to Officer Firebaugh, who was the officer on the scene, the offender. So described the offender as being blonde, in his 30s, white, wearing blue jeans with cargo pants, and a black coat. Not sure if the black coat had a hoodie, but perhaps the coat had some sort of emblem on it. And this was around 6 o'clock on January the 27th, which is a Sunday, and it just so happens that at the same time, in the 500 block of St. John's, the police arrested and pursuant to the police reports that day fit this description. Now the 500 block of St. John's and the are approximately a half mile away, give or take. But nevertheless, he has short blonde hair. He's in his 30s. He's white. He was wearing blue jeans with cargo pants. He had a black coat with a polo emblem on the front and matching footwear. He was arrested. They took his clothes. They sent it to the crime lab. The Billings Police Department went down and interviewed. Take another incident. As we're considering the concept of the state proving their case beyond a reasonable doubt. Take She was at her home on May 27, 2013. As the state has already said in their opening, they are going to present evidence that Toby Griego delivered a mattress to that address approximately 3 weeks before that. However, on May the 14th, there was a man named, and he was working for, and he matched the descriptions. Came to that same address This was after the delivery of the mattresses. And in the police reports, was described as blonde hair, mid-30s, white, 5'7", 170 pounds, with a mustache and a beard and a goatee. When you consider beyond a reasonable doubt, you can consider who was a victim in this case. When she was interviewed, she made a reference to waking up. I'm not quite sure if she woke up and thought this on her own or after talking to her sisters. Nevertheless, she woke up. And her thoughts are that her assailant reminded her of. As you consider your duty and your obligation to consider all facts and make the state prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt, other factors are inconclusive. For instance, the police got a search warrant for Toby Griego's house, yet out of the search of that house, they found nothing as far as fruits of any kind of theft. The testimony you will hear is that sheets were missing, and scarves were missing, and jewelry were missing, and phones were missing, and the gun is missing, and car keys are missing, and more jewelry is missing. There is a whole long list of items that are missing, stolen from these girls' houses. Yet when the police come and they search Toby Griego's home, they find none of this. They search cars and they do DNA testing on cars. And they find no fingerprints to match and connect Toby Griego. They find no test results and the DNA test results from the Montana Crime Lab connecting Toby Griego to these offenses. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I do want to remind you on the subject and the issue that we talked about on board here, and that is the presumption of innocence. As we sit here, the statements of the state in their opening is not evidence. You'll have to wait for the evidence to come in through the witness stand. And as we go through this process, Toby Griego is clothed with the presumption of innocence until such time as you find that the evidence persuades you differently. We're going to ask you, ladies and gentlemen, to take your oath seriously. We present the ideas that at the end, you consider that the state, whether or not they have proved their case beyond a reasonable doubt.